So good evening, everyone. I welcome you all to this fourth session of the online classes for MA Part 1, first semester in English of the CBCS program prescribed by the Rashtrasant Tukadoji Maharaj University, Nagpur University. The topic for this session is Unit 4 of Paper 1, that is Milton's Paradise Lost, and the resource person is Dr. Somnath Barure. Sir has a teaching experience of more than 15 years. He has done his doctoral research on the poems of Mohanty and Jayant Mahapatra, a comparative study of the two poets. He has presented around 22 papers in national and international conferences. 20 papers have been published in the reputed journals. He has 3 books to his credit and has completed an MRP which was funded by the UGC. Sir will be dealing with Milton's Paradise Lost, Book 2. So Barure sir, it's over to you now.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Okay. At the outset, before I begin with my talk today, let me thank the organizers, the organizing team, and the principals of all 4 colleges, institutes, for organizing and making available such a fantastic platform so as to be connected with our students during these hours of crisis due to COVID-19. My thanks are due to Dr. Kapil Singh, being the part of this organizing committee, and moreover, he is my head of the department, and with his call, without having any doubt in mind, I had to say yes. And the solid reason behind, I have been dealing with this paper for last more than 5 to 6 years. Of course, there is change in syllabus. That same paper, English poetry from Chaucer to Milton, I've been dealing with, but since last 2 years, I'm dealing with Paradise Lost Book 2, and earlier it was Paradise Lost Book 1. Now, I should make it a point, and even respected Dr. Panikar also shared the same experience, that this book being more complex compared to the first one, and has got many more references, biblical references. It is true, but that should not be an excuse when something has been prescribed in the syllabus. We have to deal with it with a jolly spirit and a readiness of all kind. So though approval was given and I was thinking about preparing a presentation of my own on this given topic, I had many more doubts, and the more I went into, more I could have doubts in multiplication. That is what I think is the beauty of reading Paradise Lost by such an eminent personality, John Milton. There is some problem actually. I'll end this presentation and again we'll start. 2-3 slides I jumped. Okay. Yes. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry for the inconvenience caused. So we are going to deal, without wasting time, with Paradise Lost Book 2, published in 1664. Here is the image picture of John Milton, and more books, actually reprints of the same. So this is one such for the convenience of students. So John Milton, before we start reading, we shall have a little bit of information about the poet. Born on 9th of December 1608 and died on November 8, 1674. Milton was an English poet, intellectual, a civil servant, one who rendered his services to the Commonwealth of England under its Council of States and later under Oliver Cromwell. A celebrated writer of English and Latin, because through my presentation and even otherwise, if you read Milton's works, you're bound to come across such Latinate vocabulary. So to mention that Milton was an expert, Milton is the major contributor, as and when we talk of English language, and his contribution through Latinate vocabulary, we should have always at the back of mind. He contributed in enriching English, as I said recently, language through many words. He attempted to use unrhymed verse outside of the theater or translation. Now, why this is important to talk about this particular contribution of Milton is blank verse is very much practiced during the Elizabethan period by playwrights, by other poets. But here, when he attempted to use this particular meter, blank verse, which he later named it as heroic verse as well, so as to make it appear, grand, with the style, with the other features that we have in epic poetry, so as to make a match, the same meter of blank verse, Milton further, calls it as heroic verse, and he makes use of that out of, the theater or translation. A freedom of speech defender through his work Pathetica, published in 1664. While at Cambridge, he started and wrote many of his shorter poems, like On the Morning of Christ's Nativity, Epitaph on William Shakespeare, El Allegro, and Il Insaroso, a vision of poetic melancholy that poet could have then. And his Lycidas, published in 1637, a pastoral elegy dedicated to the memory of King Edward, his friend at Cambridge, on his sad demise, of course. And the one we are going to deal with, Paradise Lost, published in 1664, is his most celebrated and highly acclaimed epic poem. Milton also followed up with a sequel of Paradise Lost, Paradise Regained, and a tragedy, Samson Agonized, published in 1671. Now, coming to Paradise Lost, which is an epic poem in blank verse by Milton. This poem, published in 1664, had 10 books with over 10,000 lines. And the one we are going to deal, book 2, has exactly 1,050 lines around. Second edition followed in 1674 of the same book was arranged into 12 books in the manner of Virgin's Aeneid, with minor revisions throughout. Now, the most important thing we are going to focus on the theme of this particular work and the style used, the language used by the poet, and the cause behind the composition of this work, and making it available for the readership across the world now. The poem concerns the biblical story of the fall of man. The fall of man is the theme of Milton's Paradise Lost. The temptation of Adam and Eve by the fallen angel Satan. Now, this particular point is very important from the point of view of book 2 that we're going to read. In book 1, those who have read, many students, they may not have gone through book 1, but still you have got time. So if you get time, before you read book 2, if you go through just book 1, you will have the clear-cut idea how it begins media res and how the fall of man that has been designed by Milton. And in book 2, we come across the council being called by Saturn and his fallen angels there in Pandemonium. And there they are doing a sort of conspiracy, if you call it, and they are planning how to take revenge upon God of their defeat in book 1, in the battle that took place in between the gods in heaven and the rebelled angels under the leadership of Saturn. So the second part, the conspiracy, the planning that they are doing so as to have revenge upon God, we see in book 2. So temptation of Adam and Eve, perhaps that is planned in book 2, is been executed in book 3 and 4. Next thing, expulsion of Adam and Eve after disobedience from the Garden of Eden forms the important part of this particular work. Now, in short, we shall have an idea about the doctrine of fall. Now, what this fall is in Christian world. The fall is a term in Christianity to describe the transition of the first man and woman, that is Adam and Eve, from the state of being innocent and obedient to the state of guilt and disobedience. Now, this is something very important. We should have, at the back of mind. Adam and Eve, they were innocent and obedient when they were met. And, once the trick has been played by, the Saturn and his, other angels, and they intervened, and, as per their intervention and temptation, they got corruption in the sense, Eve, falls a prey to the temptation given by Saturn and eats that fruit. Further, we are going to see that in this story. Thus, a transformation of this first man and woman, Adam and Eve, from being innocent and obedient to the state of guilt and disobedience. This doctrine of fall has had its origin from the biblical interpretation of Genesis, chapter 1 to 3. Now, this Genesis is nothing else but the Old Testament. Now, before we go ahead, let us try to understand in 1 minute the story of Adam and Eve in the Eden Garden. It goes like this. Adam and Eve were the best creation of God and were kept in the Garden of Eden. Eden Garden is a biblical paradise as per the book of Genesis, which speaks of the creation of this world and the early history of humanity. As per the account, the garden that was planted was eastward in Eden, where he placed the first man. The God made every tree that appeared pleasant to the sight and good for food in the garden. The tree of life and the tree of knowledge, of course, of good and evil, were in the midst of the garden. The man was free to eat from any tree except that of the tree of knowledge. God also made a woman, that is Eve, from the rib of man for his company. So such was the happy state of mind on the part of Adam in the Garden of Eden. Everything was made available by God to his finest creation. Now, Paradise Lost book 1 and book 2. A quick recap and connection. A part of it I have already narrated. Book 1 narrates the rebellion of angels led by Saturn and war between God and the rebelled angels beginning in media res. Defeat of Saturn and the other angels and their expulsion from heaven into the hell. Even there in hell, these fallen angels keep planning about their revenge. And the planning council of Saturn and his associates about the war or revenge upon God opens the action in book 2 of Paradise Lost, taking ahead the theme of the poem, that is fall of man. Now, Paradise Lost is an epic. Before we go directly to the text, we, the students, they being reading this book, or at least listening to this particular work of art for the first time. So this is altogether a new genre, epic. So an epic originates from a Greek word epos, which means a story or poem. Epic is a lengthy narrative form of poetry. I'm talking about Paradise Lost, whether book 1 or 2. Here it is book 2. These poems typically detail extraordinary feats and adventures of the characters from distant past. Mind it very well, everything that happens, whether in the form of characters, whether in the form of story, some war, or something supernatural in epic poetry, it has to be grand. So the characters have like gods, goddesses, the angels, and such kings, that too heavenly kings, not ordinary kings. So everything in manner, in matter, and even in treatment, uh, everything is grand in case of epic poetry. It begins in media res, as in Paradise Lost. I quoted this one: of man's first disobedience and the fruit of that forbidden tree, whose mortal test brought death into the world and all our hope. With loss of Eden, sing heavenly muse, that to the height of this great argument, I may assert eternal providence and justify the ways of God to men. Now, this quotation from the invocation part of book 1 of Paradise Lost, wherein such media res beginning, then somewhere in between, like the movies, they start somewhere in the middle, and then using flashback technique, they come to the beginning, and going into the past and coming into the present, that goes on. That is what the tool these narrators they have in their hand. There are some other epic conventions as well, like it does have a statement of theme, like Paradise Lost we have seen already in the invocation. It deals with the fall of man, and making people know the ways of God to men, making them aware of these ways. Theater, there are long formal speeches by the heroes, as in book 1 by Saturn we have seen. Milton assigns fantastic speeches. Sometimes the critics, they doubt whether Milton, by giving such stature, by giving such speeches to the character of Saturn, whether Milton was on devil's side. So such doubts readers they have, because of the speeches being assigned to the character of Saturn. Like there are divine interventions as well in the epic poetry. Here we have in the form of the fall, the way that is been manipulated, that has been planted by God. Epic has a vast setting, universal setting, you can say. Like there are references even in book 2. There are references to the East, even India. I used IND, Ind, isn't it? In the very first few lines. So epics, they have vast setting, grandiose, elevated style, language, use of epic similes or Homeric similes by Milton in this particular text. That is blank verse or heroic verse in Paradise Lost. There are epic battles as well. In fact, this particular poem begins with the battle between gods and the devils, rebelled angels. Descent into the underworld, like Saturn into the hell, we see in book 2, even in book 1. Epic similes, like Saturn's comparison with Titan or Lucifer's massive army compared with scattered leaves of autumn, are the examples of using epic similes. And like every poetry for that matter has been said having didactic nature. This form also instructs in moral and establishes the universal truth that the supreme authority is always God, and rest of the all is not in that way. Now this last slide, so as to make you have a sort of image of hell. And even, in hell, these fallen angels, they have built this Pandemonium, the capital of hell, where sitting in this same Pandemonium, now they are having a council, the supreme authority there in the capital of hell, Pandemonium. Saturn has called this council, wherein the opening lines we have: high on a throne of royal state, which far outshone the wealth of Ormus and of Ind, or where the gorgeous east with richest hand showers on her king's barbaric pearl and gold. Saturn exalted sat, by merit raised to that bad eminence, and from despair, thus high uplifted beyond hope, aspires beyond thus high, insatiate to pursue, vain war with heaven, and by success untaught, his proud imagination thus displayed. The happier state in heaven, which follows dignity, might draw envy from each inferior, but who here will envy whom the highest place exposes? Foremost to stand against the thunderers, aim your bulwark, and condemns to greatest share of endless pain. Where there is then no good for which to strive, no strife can grow up there from fraction. For none sure will claim in hell precedence, none whose portion is so small of present pain that with ambitious mind will covet more. With this advantage then to union and firm faith and firm accord, more than can be in heaven, we now return to claim our just inheritance of old, surer to prosper than prosperity, could have assured us, and by what best way, whether of open war or covert guile, we now debate who can advise me speak. As I said, the council is, been called by Saturn. Saturn is, leading them. And there in that council, Saturn has, put forth a problem to the, rebelled angels. And now they are, established. They have established a kingdom of their own there in hell. But still, they have not forgotten what they have lost. With, the defeat that they had with God there in heaven. Now they are, planning for, another war, or in the form of, some, conspiracy. So Saturn has asked, for suggestion, asked for opinion. Saturn addressing his supporters in this particular part of the poem from a magnificent golden throne, he claims that heaven is not yet lost for them, and that they might reclaim it by returning to battle. Now, this kind of mindset we have also seen in book 1, wherein time and again Saturn says mind has its own place and in itself, which makes hell of heaven and heaven of hell. Means Saturn as an entity, never regrets, or it never accepts its failure. And here also he says that heaven is not yet lost for them, and they might reclaim it by returning to battle. Saturn is such a perfect leader that even if you use Saturn in our own time, we have many more Saturns around us, and they too are never getting tired. They are very hopeful, very positive, so as to reclaim their lost things. He praises the firm accord of all the rebellious angels and their seemingly democratic state. Now this is very important, that how many of the fallen angels, they were with their mind and soul with Saturn, no idea. But still, this is such an act wherein he praises the firm accord of all. He takes all of them for granted, that they are with me, they are following me. He then opens the floor, asking whether they should fight God openly or with covert guile. through the last lines. Hence, actually, Satan has had a plan of his own, but still he is not, exposing this. He's leaving, the other, people in the council to decide. And let us see how he exploits that situation, and something that he wanted to, take as a decision, he takes through, other people. Now, when he has requested opinions of, other angels, Moloch is the one of the important angels there in the council. He stands first. Moloch is the first speaker in the response to Satan's call for advice. He was one of the fiercest fighters in the recent war against God in heaven. Moloch argues for open war, as he reasons that nothing, not even total annihilation, would be worse than the devil's current state in hell. So they have nothing to lose by fighting the torturer, that is God, and trying the weapons of hell against him. No, let us rather choose armed with hell, flames, and fury all at once. Over heaven's stars, resistors, into
Barure sir, you need to unmute yourself. You need to unmute yourself. You have muted yourself.
yes. Is it audible, sir?
Yeah. Now
Yeah.
it's audible. Yeah.
Okay.
Please
Okay.
continue.
Okay. The next speaker After Moloch, it is Belial. And the next speaker after Moloch is Belial. He was a fair, more graceful, and human in his action. Always beautiful and eloquent, but his words all false and hollow. Even in heaven, we read. He contradicts Moloch's advice and suggests that God can always punish them in a worse way if they attack him again. Belial makes the best of the devil's current situation, pointing out that they are no longer chained to the lake of fire, but are sitting and peacefully debating in the Pandemonium. He describes a hell many times worse, and in the face of this, he advocates that the devils submit to the victor's will. Victor's will, of course, the God. Belial suggests that if they do not attack, then God might eventually abate in his anger and so lessen the devil's suffering. Belial defends his own hatred of heaven, but overall he advocates that they take no action so as to avoid further pain. Milton, through the character of Belial, perhaps points out that this is ignoble ease and peaceful sloth, not peace. The way Belial speaks, he hides something. When he speaks of, peace, it is not actually peace, but he's, pretending. Actually, it is sloth on his part, a sort of, laziness, that he is not interested in any war that, the previous speaker mentioned. So perhaps he is talking about, peace with God. He too equally hates, the gods and, the heavenly kingdom. Yeah. We read Belial through these lines so as to make, his say very clear. In temper and in nature, will receive familiar the fierce heat and void of pain. This horror will grow mild, this darkness light, besides what hope the never-ending flight of future days may bring. What change worth waiting, since our present lot appears, for happy though, but ill, for ill not worst. If we procure not to ourselves more woe, thus Belial with words clothed in reasons, garb counseled ignoble ease, and peaceful sloth, not peace. Now, after Belial stands Mammon, and Mammon speaks and describes how futile it would be to submit to God and try to return to heaven. Now, all these speakers, except the last, they are putting their ideas before, but none of them is clear. He asserts that they have known revolt and freedom. That is very important. This particular character in book 2 seems to be equally balanced when he is there to put his ideas, assert he'd say, and says that we have seen both revolt and freedom. They can never again submit to God's rule and sing forced hallelujah. Now, one very interesting term that has been used by Milton here, that is an emotional expression of praise and thanks to God, but forcibly. Milton says, through the character of Mammon, that he asserts that it is not possible again to submit to God's rule and sing forced hallelujah in the lines below. For what place can be for us within heaven's bound, unless heaven's Lord supreme we overpower? Suppose he should relent all published grace to all, on promise made of new subjection, with what eyes could we stand in his presence humble and receive strict laws imposed to celebrate his throne? with world hymns, and to his God had sing forced hallelujahs, while he lordly sits our envied sorrow, and his altar breathes ambrosial odors and ambrosial flowers. Our, our servile offerings, this must be our task. In heaven, this our delight. How wearisome eternity so spent in worship, paid to whom we hate. This character, in a very nice manner, describes that how difficult it is to present one's own self, submit one's ego before God after that defeat, and what ultimately we will have a sort of treatment that perhaps we may never accept. So Mammon, being more practical and wise an angel, also rejects war, considering it as hopeless, and instead proposes that the devil peacefully expand their own freedom in their new realm of hell. He proposes that they mine more of the gold and minerals they have found there in hell, and work hard to build a world and society that will rival heaven. Through the lines, our torments also may in length of time become our elements, these piercing fires as soft as now severe. Our temper changed into their temper, which must needs remove the sensible of pain. All things invite to peaceful counsels and the settled state of order, how in safety best we may compose our present evils, with regard of what we are and we were, dismissing quiet all thoughts of war. Have what I advise. And he, very forcefully puts his own say, and there he says, war is of no use. When Mammon finishes speaking, all the devil's applause, clearly favoring his argument about the rest. They all fear a worse hell than the one they live in now. And they also fear thunder and the sword of Michael. Now, thunder may be known to each one of us. But again, the sword of Michael again is, a symbolic kind of thing, a symbolic entity. In the New Testament, in Bible, Michael leads the God's armies against Satan's forces in the book of Revelation. I'm talking about the reference of the sword of Michael from Bible, where during the war he defeats Satan and he became the protector and leader of the army of God against the forces of evil. Perhaps that defeat has made these angels of this kind, and there is a sort of fear at the back of mind. So Mammon is afraid of that fear once again at the hand of Michael, and so the sword that keeps hovering in his memories, should they go back to war, is doubtful. And then comes the supreme after Satan, that is Beelzebub. After Mammon stands just second in position after Satan, and his mouth is Beelzebub to speak, and the crowd falls respectfully silent. Beelzebub says that he also would prefer freedom in hell to servitude in heaven. A recap from book 1, wherein a fantastic speech which Satan delivers, and in his speech says, better to reign in hell than to serve in heaven. Is it? Means he welcomes, accepts, and enjoys, for that matter, because he is there to lead. So he says it's better to reign in hell than to serve in heaven. Beelzebub also speaks the same thing, because he been introduced as the mouthpiece of Satan. He says that he also would prefer freedom in hell to servitude in heaven, but he warns that they are not free here. They are God's captive multitude. Even being there in hell, they have created a kingdom of their own. They have built Pandemonium, but still there is a consciousness. There is a guilt conscious in the mind, that they consider themselves as captive multitude. He speaks in no boastfulness, but in an awakened state of mind, while putting his ideas about heaven and its rule in the lines, in height or depth, still first and last will reign. Sole king, and of his kingdom lose no part. By a revolt, but over hell extend his empire, and with iron scepter rule, use here as with his golden toes in heaven. What sit we then projecting peace and war? War hath determined us, and foiled with loss irreparable. Terms of peace hate none. Beelzebub then proposes an easier enterprise, as it is from the text. What if we find some easier enterprise? There is a place, into bracket, if ancient and prophetic fame in heaven err not, bracket close, another world, the happy seat of some new race called man, about this time to be created like to us, though less in power and excellence, but favored more of him who rules above. So was his will pronounced among the gods, and by an oath that shook heaven's whole circumference confirmed. He returns to Satan's rumor. Beelzebub, while speaking, he returns to Saturn's rumor that God planned to create a new world. And what that new world is? The new world is of Adam, Eve, and the garden. There, the world will be filled with a race called man, who will be less powerful than the angels, but more favored by God. Beelzebub suggests that the devils find this new world and either corrupt or destroy it, thus having revenge on God by ruining his joy and making him abolish his own works. Milton says that Satan first came up with this idea, as he is the author of all ill. But God still plans to use the devil's spite to further his own glory. The devils agree to Beelzebub's proposal and vote for it unanimously, because there was no other way. If it is Beelzebub speaking, means so and so Satan is speaking. Beelzebub speaks again, describing how they might find a better home in this new world of man and heal themselves of the pains of hell. Then he asks for a volunteer, as they need someone to first cross the great abyss and find the happy isle of the new world. There is a long silence, as all the devils are afraid to take this dreadful voyage. Finally, Satan grandiosely volunteers himself, promising to undergo all the hardships of the journey and earn his place as ruler of hell. Actually, everything has been sown as seeds. Just he is getting it from confirmed from the other angels. Satan commands the other devils to work at making hell more tolerable while he is away, and to tend to their wounds. He stands, and the other devils bow to him, honoring him as a god, equal to the highest in heaven, everything in comparison with heaven. They specially praise his bravery at sacrificing himself for the good of all. Milton perhaps suggesting how even the devils of the hell could come to such peaceful accord while humans fight endless wars against each other. Now, this last comment is from out of the text, but we can relate it to the present situation. Milton was, very much an academician, if we talk in terms of this contribution, but at the same time, the idea that he could have, or the need, that he had at the time of composition was, of course, was the need of an individual, a man, one who had, difficulties, troubles, and all hardships in his life. That's what we see in the form of this poem. The council is dismissed and the devils exit Pandemonium. Now, this is first half of the poem. We are just rushing through. The second part of the poem, wherein some devils tear up the earth in the frenzy, others sing songs of their lost glory, and others discuss the council on the concepts of fate and free will, and many more things, as per their interest after the council is over. Meanwhile, Saturn flies off towards the gates of hell and sees that there are actually 9 gates, 3 of brass, 3 of iron, and 3 of adamantine. In front of the gates sit 2 strange guards. One has the upper body a woman, but her lower half is a serpent. And the pack of howling hellhounds circle her waist. Now, in the wake of these objective kind of examinations online, the names of these characters, the type of gates, number of gates, that hell had, everything is very important. So students need to make it a point and remember everything. So in front of the gates sit 2 strange guards. One has the upper body of a woman, but her lower half is a serpent, and a pack of howling hellhounds circle her waist. The other is just a black, terrifying figure. Saturn confronts the dark figure first and demands passage through the gates. The figure mocks Saturn's defeat in heaven and commands him to return to his punishment. Now, 2 more characters are introduced in this part. One being sin, and the other being, her own son, that is death. So these 2 characters we meet in the second half. Now, when Saturn could see these 2 figures there at the gates of hell, the snaky sorceress intercedes, calling Saturn father, and the dark figure his only son. "O father, what intends thy hand?" she cried, "against thy only son. What fury, O son, possesses thee to bend that mortal dart against thy father's head?" When Saturn was to enter, he was actually, asking for entry into hell. But due to not having knowledge to death of his own father, he was, behaving otherwise, and they were about to fight. And then, the sin makes her entry, and she is there to make them understand who they are. Saturn asks her to explain, and the woman beast says that she is Saturn's daughter in heaven. When Saturn was still an angel, she had sprung forth from his head when he first conceived of rebelling against God. She was called Sin, and she was beautiful then and soon owned over the other angels. Saturn himself became enamored with her and incestuously impregnated her in secret. Then the war had broken out in heaven in book 1, and sin was cast into hell with the other rebel angels. But before she fell, she was given a key to hell's gates and instructed to keep them shut forever. After she arrived in hell, sin gave birth to the dark figure, who is called Death. Death immediately pursued sin and raped her, and she then gave birth to the hounds that now torture her, gnawing constantly at her insides. Now she and Death sit guarding the gates together, hating each other, but bound together by fate. Now, the creation of such characters in Paradise Lost Book 2. The reader can easily grab the idea what Milton had at the back of mind. Milton was speaking of the present situation around him, the polity, the torture, the sort of exploitation during his time. So he being a part of that system, now he is trying to speak of these things from the religious angle. He's relating it to some religious thing from the biblical book. Saturn, who seems to have forgotten all of this, now speaks more kindly to sin and death. Now he has accepted them. He reveals his plan to find God's new world and corrupt it. And he promises to bring sin and death with him once he has made it ready, using words below. Through and through, the character of Saturn, manages everything. Here also again, he makes or convinces his own daughter sin and son death, so as to be on his side and help him. He says, I haste to know, and this once known shall soon return. He promises them, and bring A to the place where thou and death shall dwell at ease, and up and down unseen. Wing silently the buxom air, embalmed with odors. There A shall be fed and filled immeasurably. All things shall be your prey. Now, this is a sort of temptation again, sort of a promise that he made to sin and death. Sin repeats her instructions to guard hell's gate, but then declares that she would rather obey her father, Satan, than God, whom she hates. She takes out the fatal key, sad instrument of all our own, and unlocks the gates. The gates open and remain open, as sin does not have the power to close them again. On the other side is a dark abyss of chaos and night. Just in one or two paragraphs, I would like to complete this particular part, and that through not by reading the text, the text being very lengthy. Satan flies over this strange bogey landscape and then hears a great cacophony of noise. He approaches the noise and sees chaos himself along with his consort, one another character. Night and others like chance, confusion, and discord. Satan speaks respectfully to them, asking for directions, earth, and promising to return it to its original state of disorder, thus bringing it back under chaos' power. Chaos recognizes Satan and to him where the universe of man is, hoping that Satan will create, having and spoil and ruin there. Satan moves onward, but his path grows very difficult and dangerous. Milton compares it to the voyages of Ulysses or the Argonauts, but said that Satan's journey was even more perilous. Sin and death follow behind him. As such was the will of heaven, and they start building bridge from hell to earth. They make the bridge wide and easy so that devils can enter earth and tempt mortals, and so that mortals will easily be lured down to hell. Finally, Satan approaches the new world and his journey grows easier, and he can see the far-off light of heaven. The whole universe of humanity is just a small star in the huge darkness. Now, this is roughly the book 2 structure, the number of characters and their role, and the action that began with the call of a council and seeking opinions of the fallen angels, and then Saturn takes a lead, and he's there in search of the new world that has been created by God, wherein Adam and Eve they are placed, and the plan is to either snatch it if possible, or if not, at least corrupt it and be a part of it if something is to be have. So when we read this poem, it's very important that the students, now the common rule of reading a poetry, the first thing while reading you should have pleasure of reading, and by the time you finish reading you should feel that you have grown experience wise. Of course, here the second reference, the second expectation, as and when we read a poem, experience wise we grow very much, but so far as enjoyment is concerned, I think Milton had no idea. Milton had no plan of pleasing, entertaining, making readers enjoy his work. So entertainment I am not sure about, but experience wise you are likely to grow by reading this particular part of Paradise Lost. Now What do we learn by reading book 2 of Paradise Lost? One thing, Milton satirizes political debates in this devilish council, opposing the monarchies in England, especially during his time, that is James I and Charles II. The time, when this particular work was composed, that was 1658 to 1664. So the kind of atmosphere, environment that Milton had to face, especially of the civil war that took place during his time, and the kind of defeat, the protectorate government, the parliamentarians, they had to face, and Milton had to survive the complete opposite kind of atmosphere. Therein he had this idea, wherein he satirizes political debates in this devilish council, because he could not do that in actual life, opposing the monarchies in England, and was a proponent of individual freedom. While talking about his contributions, I said, I think it was about Areopagitica, wherein he defends the freedom of speech, individual freedom again here, that we read through this book. God was the only rightful ruler, and any human government was inherently partly unjust. That we come to know by reading book 2 of Paradise Lost. Milton shows how political power corrupts, and religious and political leaders deceive the public or do evil things in the name of the greater good. This debate between the devils is in reality a farce, and Satan has already made his decision and is simply letting his followers play at democracy. Now this is something very appropriate to the situation that we have around us. Though we are talking of 17th century, but this particular principle used by Milton in the making of this particular work fits even the situation that we have in 21st century. We have everything in the name of democracy, but everything has been decided, and it is a sort of gameplay that we see in book 2 on the part of Satan and Beelzebub, that they have decided what they are going to do with the revenge part, or the war they are talking about, but it is not known to others who have participated the council, and they are there to exchange their opinions and ideas. Sloth is one of the deadly sins, according to Milton, that he relates with Belial's speech of peace with God. Many other characters, they speak, but is it reality that they are speaking, or do they have something to be hidden, and they're showing something else? When somebody is talking in terms of peace with the heavenly powers, it is not only peace, but it is the laziness on their part, or they have fallen a prey to the situation around them, maybe in the form of riches, the gold mines and all. So Belial is one such character who has fallen a prey to sloth, says Milton. And Satan through Beelzebub finally makes the proposal that will lead to the fall of man and the poem's main plot. Further, the devils continue in their sin and show their punishment by refusing to submit to God even after their defeat, and insisting on trying to ruin his creation and bring evil out of good. The work takes us lastly to this particular part. God, being eternal, can foresee these plans, and so will look further ahead to bring good out of their evil, is the message somewhere the poet wanted to give. The devils succumb to Satan's tricks without even realizing it, as Eve within later books, perhaps she's been tempted by Satan, and she falls a prey to that temptation. Satan volunteers to sacrifice himself for the other devils, risking his safety to cross the abyss and corrupt earth. In a way, he establishes himself and gets it confirmed that he is the one who can lead them. The devils still hope for a happier home, not realizing they carry their suffering with them. We, the readers, come to know. Milton mockingly praises the devil's accord, which was actually just a clever fraud by Satan, to further satirize the political evils he saw in the world. This is something very practical we come across reading through book 2. Milton satirizes philosophical debates. The idea is perhaps to make aware of forbidden knowledge that leads nowhere. All these characters, they speak, which has got no meaning, because the action is being directed in a particular direction, and that is already decided, so it leads nowhere. The simple message this book passes is: live in simple obedience. Satan is the father of disobedience and revolt, gave birth to sin, and therefore all sin is the product of disobedience against God, we learn. In giving sin the key to hell, God seems to implicitly encourage Satan's escape, and therefore the temptation and fall of humanity was very much persistent. Now, sometimes as a reader, we doubt, if everything is being governed by God, why this drama? No, within the limits of art, we have to accept this. And further going, the last thing I think we should know, with sin and death's bridge being built so as to connect the hell and earth, Milton tries to justify the immense suffering caused by Adam and Eve's later disobedience. They don't just offend God's sensibilities, they also allow these monsters to enter earth and infect every living thing. I think these are the things we should make it a point while reading this poem. I know it very well that dealing with such a huge book, though in parts, in 1 hour, is a Herculean task. But I attempted. But this is not complete. While reading again, if you refer to these slides, again, subject to the organizers, if they make it available to the students, it will certainly, be a sort of add-on thing, will help you reading the original text and, to understand the text in totality. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Yeah, it is really a Herculean task, challenge to teach Paradise Lost in an hour. Whichever may be the book, from book 1 to book 9, it is really a challenge. And the slides that this will be available to the students on YouTube.
Okay.
On the same link to which they had joined. So Dr. Somnath Barure has started with giving us the doctrine of fall regarding the story of through the story of Adam and Eve. Then he gave us certain characteristics of an epic, and regarding about the Paradise Lost, how is it an epic? Then the different characters, the illustration, the image of Pandemonium, that is what we had, and the different characters, Moloch, Belial, Mammon. Through them, he went ahead with the story of the book 2. And as every epic comes out with some moral, that is what he also ended his lecture with, that what do we learn from the book 2 of Paradise Lost. So thank you, sir, for your for sparing your valuable time with us. And I'm sure that the students will be benefited with this lecture. The things will be available, the slides will be available on the YouTube, and sir will be submitting us MCQs in a day or so, and all that will be made available to the students.
Okay.
So thank you, sir. Thank you, Barure, sir.
Thank you, sir.
here
Thank
with
you.
us.
Karthik sir, thank you.
It was a nice presentation, in fact. Nice
Thank you, sir.
presentation. You tried your best to cover as much as is possible.
Yes, I tried, sir.
Yeah, and it came out well, in fact. It came out well.
There was a problem actually. It got disconnected. And
Yeah.
for that, I had to start again.
Yeah.
Yes.
Otherwise, I mean, it was good. Good.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
So, Kapil, can we end the lecture, end the session?